I grew up in a small town, the kind where Friday night football games felt like the center of the universe, and the only things worth looking forward to were the seasonal events. The county fair in summer, the haunted house in October, and the corn maze. If you've never been in a proper one, it's hard to explain the scale. They cut miles of twisting paths into an endless field of stalks that rise higher than your head. You can hear people laughing and shouting nearby, but the corn swallows sound strangely. So voices seem closer or farther than they really are. The walls all look the same. The paths loop back on themselves, and before long you don't know if you're moving forward or circling the same patch of dirt. The year I'm talking about, I was 12. It was the first Friday of October, and my friends and I had been buzzing about the maze all week. We dropped our backpacks at home after school. We met up at the gas station like we always did, and pooled our allowance for sodas and candy. We were excited. Too old to be scared of some farm attraction. Too young to admit we were hoping we'd actually get scared. There were 4 of us. Myself, Aaron, my neighbor Kyle, and Marcus, who had just moved to town and was desperately trying to fit in. We got to the farm just before sunset. The sky burned orange behind the silos, and the floodlights along the maze flickered, one by one. A teenage worker handed us a map and a flag. The flag was in case you got lost or scared and wanted someone to come lead you out. None of us planned on using it. We shoved the map into one of our pockets without looking. Part of the fun was pretending we didn't need it. The maze swallowed us in quick. We walked shoulder to shoulder at first, laughing too loud, trying to spook each other. The air smelled like dry husks and damp soil. Every so often we'd hear shrieks of laughter drifting through the corn, other kids running wild somewhere nearby. We were maybe 10 minutes in when we noticed the boy. He slipped into our group like he'd been there the whole time. None of us saw where he came from. He was younger, maybe 8, maybe 9, small, pale. His clothes didn't fit right. His shirt was buttoned unevenly. His shoes were scuffed, and his hair looked like he'd cut himself with dull scissors. "What's your name?" I asked. He grinned, showing teeth too big for his mouth. "Don't matter." That threw me. Kids always give names, even fake ones. But he fell into step with us like it was natural, darting ahead, tugging on the stalks, pointing at paths we should take. At first, we figured he'd gotten separated from his family. Maybe he thought we'd help. Then he started causing trouble. He would run ahead of us. He would block the path and then vanish into the corn, only to appear behind us seconds later. He would whisper something nasty into Marcus's ear, and then he laughed when Marcus spun around confused. Once, when Aaron bent to tie his shoe, the boy grabbed a stalk and whipped it across Aaron's back hard enough to leave a welt. "Cut it out," Kyle snapped. The boy tilted his head. "You can't tell me what to do. You're not my dad." We tried to ignore him, but he was quick. Too quick. Always there, darting just out of reach. The deeper we went, the darker it grew, and the easier it was to lose track of him in the maze of shadows. Every time we thought he was gone, he would appear again, grinning. At some point, Aaron said what we were all thinking. We should go back. But that's when we realized we didn't know which way back was. We turned too many times. The map was useless at this point, and the floodlights, which had seemed comforting at the start, barely reached the center of the maze. We were wrapped in darkness, the corn towering above us, the sky hidden. The boy wasn't scared, however. If anything, he seemed energized, like the maze was his home turf. "You're lost," he said in a sing-song fashion. "I can take you out, but you gotta do something first." We all looked at each other, but none of us answered. He plucked a rock from the dirt path, tossed it in his hand, and then, without warning, he whipped it at Marcus. It hit his cheek with a crack. Marcus yelped, stumbling back and clutching his face. The boy laughed so hard he doubled over. That's when Aaron lost it. He lunged, grabbing the boy by the shoulders. But the boy didn't fight back. He just went limp, like a doll. His grin never wavered. Aaron shoved him hard into the stalks, and he disappeared with a rustle. We didn't chase after him. We just stood there, listening, waiting for him to burst out laughing again, waiting for him to come running from another direction. But the maze was silent. Minutes passed. We started walking, fast, no longer jogging, no longer playing. The corn seemed tighter around us, the paths much narrower. Every shadow looked like him crouching just out of sight. Finally, after what felt like forever, we saw a glow through the stalks, the exit. Floodlights and the sound of cars in the gravel lot. We bolted, bursting out of the maze into the cool night air. The farmyard was emptying. Families piling into minivans, teenagers laughing on hay bales. Everything looked normal. But as we walked toward the lot, Marcus went pale. "What?" I asked. He pointed at the prize board near the entrance, the one with Polaroid photos of groups who had finished the maze that night. We scanned it half-heartedly, not really expecting to see ourselves. But there he was, the boy. Not with us this time, but standing dead center in a photo of a family. Mom, Dad, 2 little girls. He was grinning wide, arms slung around the sisters like they were his. The parents didn't look like they noticed. They were smiling at the camera, proud they'd finished the maze. We told one of the workers, a teenager in a hoodie, that the boy had been in the maze alone, that he didn't belong to anyone. The kid just shrugged, said people get separated all the time. That was the last we saw of him. Until Monday morning. That's when the news hit. A family, Mom, Dad, 2 little girls, never made it home Friday night. Their car was still in the farm parking lot. The police had no clue what happened to them. They found footprints near the car, but eventually disappeared. No trace of them since. The article didn't say anything about a boy, but we knew. We knew exactly who walked out of that maze with them. That was over 20 years ago. I try not to think about it, but just last week, outside of a strip mall, 2 towns over, I caught sight of someone standing by the crosswalk. Same pale face, same grin, only this time he wasn't 8 or 9 anymore. He looked my age, and he was watching a group of kids coming out of an ice cream shop, almost like he was choosing. I grew up in farm country, and if you've ever been in a corn maze at night, you know it feels different than in the day. The paths seem tighter, the stalks seem taller, and the sound, that's the worst part. Laughter, footsteps, voices, they carry through the rows, but you can't tell if they're 10 feet away or 50. It's like the corn bins sound in ways you don't understand. When I was 16, I got a part-time job at a corn maze about 30 minutes from where I lived. It wasn't glamorous, mostly parking cars, taking tickets, and at the end of the night, walking the maze with a flashlight to make sure no kids got stuck inside. I hated that part. The maze was huge, designed to keep people lost for over an hour. At night, with the wind blowing through the stalks, it felt like being underwater. Everything was muffled, isolated. Still, I showed up every weekend. One night, last weekend of the season actually, We had a big crowd. It was Friday, cool and damp, and people came out in droves. By closing, we had to practically herd the stragglers out of the maze. Families laughing, teenagers running, everyone spilling toward the parking lot. By 11, the place was nearly empty. A couple workers cleaning the concession stand. My supervisor locking up the ticket booths. That's when he handed me the flashlight. One last sweep, make sure we didn't miss anybody. I hated hearing that. But I nodded, clicked the beam on, and stepped back inside. The paths looked different at night, even though I'd walked them 100 times. The dirt was dark and wet, and the stalks loomed over me like walls. My light cut narrow tunnels through the rows. I moved slowly, calling out every so often, "Maze is closed. Time to head out." At first, all I heard was the crunch of my own boots and the wind rattling the stalks. Then, however faint, a laugh. High-pitched, sharp, like a kid trying not to be caught. "Hello?" I called. "You need to head out. We're closed." No answer. I pushed forward, taking turns at random. The laugh came again, closer this time. I raised my light, but I saw nothing but dirt and corn. That's when I saw the shoe, a little kid's sneaker, lying half buried in the path. "Hey," I called out, trying to sound calm. "You dropped this?" Nothing. I bent down, picked it up, turned it in my hand. It was small, muddy, and pink. I reached for my radio. "Think I've got a kid in here." Static crackled back. Then my supervisor's voice. "Copy. Bring him out." I shoved the radio in my pocket and froze. There was rustling. Not behind me, not ahead, but alongside me, somewhere in the stalks. I spun the flashlight into the rows. The beam lit only dry leaves, swaying. Then it started again. More footsteps, keeping pace with mine. I walked faster. The steps matched. I stopped. The steps stopped. My chest went tight. I called out, "This isn't funny." Silence. Then a voice. It was deep, calm, and way too close. "You're not supposed to be here." My throat closed. This was not a kid. I shined my light widely into the corn. Nothing. Just stalks bending where something had moved. I turned down another path, quicker now. The maze forked and twisted. I had no idea if I was going toward the exit or deeper in. That's when I saw the second shoe. Bigger this time, adult-sized, sitting perfectly in the center of the path. Then another, 20 feet ahead. And another. It was a trail. Men's work boots, women's flats, children's sneakers, each one carefully placed in a line leading deeper into the maze. I wanted to run, but my legs locked up. My light shook in my hand. Somewhere behind me, the voice came again. "You're not supposed to be here." I don't remember how long I ran after that. Long enough that when I finally burst out near the parking lot, I collapsed against the fence, gasping. My supervisor came jogging over quickly. "What in God's name? You look like you've seen a ghost." I tried to explain. The shoes, the voice, the footsteps keeping pace with me. He just shook his head. "Must have spooked yourself. Happens." We went back in there with 3 other workers, sweeping every path, every row, every corner. Nothing. No man, no shoes, not even the pink sneaker I swore I'd picked up. I left that night feeling uneasy, but convinced myself I'd imagined it. Weeks later, the police were called to the neighboring county. A teenager had been missing for 3 days. When they found him, he was in an old cornfield, tied to a post, beaten, but alive. He wouldn't say much. He looked rough. For as badly as he was beaten, and as long as he'd been out there, I'm actually surprised he survived. The more police investigated, the more evidence that turned up. Old cases, long considered runaways, all had one strange detail in common. Missing children reported near cornfields, none of them ever found. And then I realized, the voice I heard, the shoes, the pattern of placement. This wasn't random. It was practiced. For decades. I quit my job shortly after, and I never went back into another corn maze, because quite often I remember what it felt like that night. And I know what it feels like to be on the list. I still remember that October weekend, and I wish I could forget it. My wife and I took our 2 kids, Emma, 8, and Jake, 6, to the county corn maze. It was one of those autumn traditions. Pumpkin patch, hay rides, a labyrinth of tall corn to wander through before Halloween. Emma insisted that she was old enough to go off with her little brother for a while we trailed behind. I agreed, thinking nothing could go wrong. After all, it was a crowded maze, but we could still see them through the breaks in the stalks. The sun was setting. The sky burned orange behind the silos, and the corn stretched taller than my head, stalks brushing my shoulders as we walked. The smell of damp soil and husks filled the air. It was supposed to be fun. At first, it was fine. Emma and Jake laughed, running ahead through the paths. My wife and I followed slowly. But then I noticed something. A man standing near a fork in the maze, watching the kids. He looked normal, mid-30s, jeans, jacket, but the way he lingered made my skin crawl. He didn't move as the kids ran past him. He just smiled faintly and adjusted his coat. I told myself I was overreacting. Crowds of parents, visitors, maybe he was just waiting for someone. My wife and I let it go. As I was turning the next corner, my heart sank. I realized Emma and Jake were no longer there. Not just out of sight. Gone. I called their names, but nothing but the rustle of corn leaves. My wife started panicking. We ran through the maze, shouting their names, following paths we thought led to them, but the maze twisted on itself. Each turn looked the same. The sun had dipped below the horizon, and shadows stretched and thickened. Our flashlights barely pierced the stalks. I kept thinking, someone took them, but who? A stranger? A prankster? That man? The thought paralyzed me for a moment. Then I heard it. Jake's voice, shouting, "Dad! Dad!" I sprinted toward the sound, and there he was, my 6-year-old, trapped on a narrow path with a man blocking the way. The man crouched slightly, hands raised, like he meant no harm, but I could see the tension in the way he moved. "Move away from my son," I shouted. The man didn't answer immediately. He tilted his head. Then he uttered something that I'll remember for the rest of my life. "Oh, he's mine now." Then, in the blink of an eye, he grabbed Jake, picking him up off the ground. I immediately darted after them. But before I could make more than 3 steps, in what could only be considered a stroke of sheer luck, around the corner came a tall, stocky-built teenager who worked at the corn maze. I shouted at the teenager, "Stop them!" And no sooner that I got the words out of my mouth, the young man, without hesitation, reared back and punched the man who was holding my son directly in the face. It stopped the man dead in his tracks as he collapsed to the ground. Jake fell with him, but quickly got up and sprinted into my arms. Once I grabbed Jake, I noticed to my right that my wife was holding Emma in her arms. At some point, she managed to escape the man. It wasn't long after that the police arrived. They told me there had been reports of suspicious adults lurking near cornfields that week. Nothing specific, no crimes, just odd behavior. They said people often underestimate how confusing and easy it is to get lost in a maze. After the man was handcuffed and shoved into the back of a police car, we never saw him again. Before we left to head home, I found the young man who had helped to save Jake. Adam was his name. I told him I couldn't thank him enough for acting so quickly. He replied with a simple, "Happy to help." I was relieved to have my family in the car, heading home finally. But I couldn't shake the image. The way that man held Jake, held my son, watching, beforehand, silent and deliberate. Emma still talks about it sometimes, whispers about the man in the corn. Jake doesn't remember much. He just remembers being scared and me yelling. My wife tries to forget about it. And me? I just feel lucky that I didn't lose my kids that night. But that night, in that maze, I realized just how fragile that our sense of safety in everyday life really is.